Okay, guys, this is part two. So, I am the spiritual philanthropist, and this is not unbeknownst to me that whenever I try to do anything, post anything live, I go through this consistently. They were just saying that I was having some unknown errors that were prohibiting me from posting my stuff here. But I'm going to continue to try to post, and hopefully, this, will actually work this time. So those of you that were cut off just now, please forgive me, and you'll see that I am trying to get this going, but I'm going to continue to go up against this. I've had to go through this type of stuff before, but let's go further. I want to go over a little bit of what this man just said, so I'm going to go back just a little bit here to try to pick up some of the stuff that Wesley was just saying. So let's see if this is where we're at here.
They actually come from the created order, and when they die in this battle, right, when Tiamat is defeated, the defeated gods become the earth and the sky and the plants and even you and me. And in that sense, the theme is that you don't actually have any purpose or end result, and you're not created in the image of God. In fact, in the ancient Babylonian system, only the kings were created in the image of God. And what we see that is counter to that is that even, sure, there's superficial, divided the waters, but we find that in almost every society and culture. That's not a parallel as much as it's just a generality. I would say what we see within the biblical account is that God purposefully creates. There's only one God. He purposefully creates, and then he creates, and it's good. And it continues to say it's good 7 times, and then at the end of...
Hold on a minute, guys. Let me just see if I lower the quality here. And I apologize about lowering the quality, but I go through this so much, guys. You don't understand. And it seems, and even when I call the company, there's no way around it. It's just that these people are just relentless in stopping me.
And then at the end of chapter 1, just for the thick people in the original audience, it says, and then it was very good. And then he creates humanity, not kings, but simply the humans that he creates in God's image. And they have purpose and meaning, and that instills them with this creation order. And that's not what we find in the Enuma Elish. In fact, we find the opposite in the Enuma Elish, is that the created order is not good, it's a mistake, and that you are not created in the image of God. And there's a reminder that regular people are not created in the image of God. So linguistically, Hebrew does have Semitic ties with Akkadian. It doesn't with Sumerian. Sumerian is a language isolate, a glutenizing language. But I would say, just with all due respect, the parallels linguistically are not there. There might be superficial kind of concepts that are there, but they're so superficial.
So I just want to point out here that he's using language. Do you think that the everyday person is going to understand every word that this man says? They're very large words that he's using. So I'm assuming that when he said glutenize or something close to that, maybe that's because in the context he was using it, it most likely seems that he was saying something that was cohesive to what they were talking about or bonding with everything else. That's my guess. I have to look it up and research. But I can kind of like pick things apart and do that. But I don't think everybody that watches these videos will understand every word that's uttered out of this man's mouth. That's why I said there's a play on words here all the time. And him having the status of who he is and addressing this in the way that he does. So I just also wanted to bring up that he was talking about, the context of the Enuma Elish and how it had the established order. And he's saying the order was not very good, right? And saying that, yes, we were not, or these people that they're talking about, the Enuma Elish, were not created in the image of God. So, the thing that you have to keep in mind here is that you're talking about something much more ancient than the Bible, right? So if you keep the idea that this is something more ancient than the Bible, then how can this story be fabricated? You're telling me only up to a certain point in the timeline of the entire history of the universe that the creation story in the Bible is the only story. This is where I have a problem, because you have all this other time before that to deal with. And he kind of he keeps using the fact that he's a historian and a linguist, but yet there's no scientific, there's methodology, but there's no scientific validation to back any of the stuff up that he's saying. And you guys have to realize that. This is, I almost have a feeling that these guys that went up against Billy Carson here are shills. If you don't understand what the word shill means, and I'm saying they're a shill for the government or for some other higher entity that's involved in like when they do fact finding and all that other kind of stuff, or in the propaganda and trying to keep the idea of the Christian beliefs in the light, and anybody that tries to challenge it will have to go through something similar to what Billy Carson is going through and other people who've challenged these ideas in the past. It's like right now Billy Carson is going through what I call a modern day lynching or crucifixion, because it's being done on the media. It's a social media crucifixion or lynching, because they're literally trying to destroy his career here, which is really, really horrible. But I'm sure that if people are out there and they have a brain and they listen to what I'm telling them, my words will make sense to you. Semantics isn't always going to win the debate. You can play on words as much as you want, but it will not win the debate. You can use the largest words that you have, and it will make you look educated, but it will not win the debate in the end. Logic always wins the debate. When there is a set form of logic, a consecutive form of logic, and people can follow along, they're going to understand. Right now, I have no choice but to tell it to you like the way that I am, but I'm known for doing it that way. This is who I am, the spiritual philanthropist. I'm going to give you my really no-holds-barred, honest, brash opinion and perspective. So let's listen to more of what he has to say, and I'm going to break that down as well. So let's hear what Wesley has to say.
That we can find them in everything, in the sense of I'm in my office studio, you're in your office studio. That doesn't mean that that we're the same people or we're even in the same place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't agree with that. I just see if I have all these texts out, there's a lot of different information that you can see. There's a lot of it's been copied word for word into the biblical text. In the
But what's the word
in the
for
ver-
word?
in your version of what you believe in, you keep saying
Uh-huh.
that God's a he.
Yep.
And so where do you get that from?
Well, throughout both the Hebrew Old Testament and the Greek New Testament, you have the masculine singular pronoun used for God.
And why is God
Okay, guys, I'm going to stop this right here. And if you have a computer and access to YouTube, type in God in the plural form, and you'll see at the very beginning of Genesis, the very beginning of the Bible, God is referred to in Hebrew as Elohim. Elohim, because people see the EL, they're probably thinking Spanish, and whatever other language has EL, like El and Ea, right? Even though he's a linguist, the average person would look at the EL and be like, oh, that must be like Elvis, or EL, like it's a man. No, El Elohim, the full form of El, is actually saying us. They refer to themselves as either they or us or them. Because if you see that there's parts of the Bible where it says that he Adam they refer to Adam as a he. He's the one that's referred to in the singular plural form as Adam. And in the ancient Sumerian text, it's Adama, I believe, who is the first creation in the ancient Sumerian text. Because Billy Carson talks about this all the time. So the simple fact that this guy, Wesley, is saying that they refer to God in the male singular form, and like I said, go into Google and put God in plural form, and you'll see it for yourself, and you'll understand that what I'm saying is true. He's not correct here. And he could see it in his eyes when he said it, that he knew he was wrong here. This has to be a part of it, because he didn't study the Hebrew languages fully. He admitted that here. He studied the ancient Coptic Greek and whatever else, and the Akkadian languages and things like that. But to study the full Hebrew or Aramaic languages, you'll see, and there's no way around this, that you cannot bullshit your way, excuse my language, you cannot BS your way around this. It starts off, God created us, humans in our image, not in his image, in our image. So I agree with the whole non-gender part. That makes sense because he's referring in the plural. That's why there's no gender, because he says our, they, and them, but he never told you that. And now listen to what he's saying. So right here, completely, his whole argument is getting destroyed. And hopefully you guys are getting to see this, and you can hear me talking, because a lot of times when I do this, they kind of bump me off here, So I'm hoping that you guys can actually hear this. All right, guys. Whoops, sorry about that, guys. I have a little thing going on here. And I hope that you guys can hear this, and I hope it's making sense to you. I really do, okay? Go YouTube it and find out for yourself. Let's see what else he says that I can pick apart.
Man, where's the evidence of this?
Well, God isn't a man. See, within historical Christianity, we don't believe that God has a gender. However, the way that he has decided to reveal himself is through the masculine plural, and then ultimately by becoming a human in the person of Jesus Christ. So we don't believe that God has a gender. In fact, the fact that God creates humanity in his image and he creates them male and female, those are two aspects of the image of God. And so that's the completeness. So historical Christianity has never argued that God is gendered.
Okay, so what he just said is kind of tricky as well, because he's stating that since they created, the male and the female, and that these beings were created in God's image, that there is no gender. But he needs to add that's because in the ancient language of Hebrew, it says, even in the Arabic, it says Elohim, which is expressed in the plural form, okay, not singular. So they're saying that there's many, not one. And he keeps forgetting to say that here. He's strategically not saying it here, I believe now, because if he's a linguist, he should know this. I'm not a linguist. I know it, and you can Google it or YouTube it. Like I said, look up God in the plural form. Check it for yourself. Fact check it.
Jesus is gendered in the sense that during the incarnation, he becomes a human man, but he's still fully man and fully God. But God is spirit. And right, as the scripture says, we worship him in spirit and in truth. But nobody's arguing that. What's that? Sorry?
That always blows my mind.
God is the same all the time, right? He's always good. It's always, God is all the same all the time, right?
Yeah, but we do see that in scripture, God has revealed himself through the masculine plural. And there are aspects of God's character that we see within scripture that do actually.
Okay, so right there he slipped up from what he said earlier. If you rewind this part right here, just a few seconds back, he said that God revealed himself in the masculine and the singular. He just admitted that God revealed himself in the masculine, and then he said in the plural. Okay? So he knows. That was a Freudian kind of slip there, even though it's not sexual in content, but it was on his mind, in other words. That's why I said Freudian. He knows the truth. That's why he said that. So he can't, and he's not, the funny thing is he's very strategic. Guys like this are extremely strategic in what they're saying. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a prompt in front of him that gives him information on what to say. I wish I could see, maybe get a close-up on his eyes to see if he's reading off a prompt somehow that's giving him information. Because it almost seems like this is propaganda now to me. I'm not being funny here. I'm being serious. And it's just very, very strange to me. And then when he just said that, God appeared in the form of man and in the form of God. That's an interesting thing. And he doesn't go any further into explaining that. Okay? So you have to understand, when you say things like that and you make all these, very larger than life comments and statements, it would be nice to have something, if you're a linguist, to back up why they said that, especially if you're a linguist. Why are you saying that? Why are they able to say that there was a man and God in one? Okay, and why was he the only one that's man and God? But if we're all made in the image of God, right, and we all are part spirit, then we're pretty much not any different from this man God. And even Christ himself also said in his own words that ye are all gods. The kingdom of God is within. And that's another way of saying that ye are all gods. He mentions it multiple times in the Bible, and Billy Carson himself has reiterated this idea as well. So that's why I said there's a lot of things that are that I would beg to differ and to really try to scrutinize a little bit more, and get some real answers from him. I'd love to talk to this guy and get some answers from him.
To communicate, Jesus says that he longs to gather Israel like a mother hen collects her chicks. So we see aspects of, the feminine of God, not meaning that God is feminine, but that the image of God reflects both the masculine and the feminine. And that's why when, the two become one flesh, there's a uniting of that reflects the image of God as well within the covenant of marriage.
Do you actually believe that the majority of Christians really believe that God is not masculine, that God has both aspects?
I mean, it's irrelevant what the majority of Christians believe.
How many would tell you, that God's not a man? They've never been taught this.
Well, I was taught it growing up. I was taught it in when I was a child, when I went to seminary, when I went to Bible college. I was taught it in graduate school. I would say I would say a few things to that. I would say, in one sense, it's irrelevant what the majority of Christians believe, because what historical biblical Christianity articulates is what they should believe. There are Christians who run around saying all sorts of things that are not in conformity to biblical, historical, Orthodox Christianity. And they shouldn't believe that because it's irrelevant. And so if one Christian believes something that is not in line with biblical Christianity, I mean, that's on them. So God is not gendered, but...
Okay, the reason I stopped it here is to show that, wow, he really has an opinion here, and he's not afraid to express it. Also, more than that, more than just an opinion, he has an ideology behind that opinion. He has a real belief system going, because he's also taking the stance that if people question something about the validity of what they're saying in the Bible, that they shouldn't do it, that they should just blindly listen to the the standardized versions of the biblical texts that that have been canonized, or whatever the word is that they use there, authenticated or accepted, or whatever the case is, right? The accepted versions, and just follow along with the church without questioning anything. Now, it's so funny if today we're living in a world where we know in the history of our society that there were times in the Dark Ages as well, and not too far behind, not only but 100 years or two before our present moment, that there were times where there were burning witches, so-called witches. Why? Because they believed that they were under the influence of something called Satan. Okay, and a lot of these people, I believe, were not followers of Satan. Anything that wasn't prescribed by the Bible in some way or another, and if you went against that, just like in Islam, same exact idea, is very archaic in some form and barbaric, and they actually implemented forms of violence and killing and all these things, and humiliation, which we see today. It's very prevalent. What they're doing right now to Billy Carson is a form of that. It's a social media form of it, because I think they did this very slick and very ninja-like to get him on here and to kind of like have him in this situation. But thank God I'm here and I'm able to speak on his behalf in some way, and not just on his behalf, but on the behalf of the actual idea of looking at things in a neutral form as well. It's I don't want to be opinionated either. I want to say no. Let's question these things. That's what I'm doing, really. So Wesley, you better come up with some better, reasoning and logic here. Which you don't think you're using a lot of logic. You're using opinions here, and that's all you have is opinions and perspectives that are that you're trying to either promote or perpetrate. I'm not sure which word to use here, but let's go ahead and look further and see what's going on.
He does express through inspired scripture the masculine the masculine pronoun.
That's pretty convenient.
See, guys, he made the mistake again. Look at his face. He knows that somebody's looking right now and knows that the word Elohim means us, they, and them in our image. Not in his masculine form, in our image. He knows that I'm sitting here, but he doesn't know me. But he knows there's someone out there that knows the truth that's going to tell him. Now look at his face. You can see dares in the headlight right there. That's me, buddy. I'm that light shining at you right now. So, Billy Carson, I'm with you, bro.
And I mean, for an all-knowing, all-loving God to understand that human beings were going to take that and abuse it to put their boot on the neck of women for eons, it's pretty interesting. Also, I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, I mean, so hold on. Let me speak to that because it is interesting that.
Quick, guys, I have to.
Yeah, sure.
If it was only for the Old Testament, I would have a hard time following a lot of stuff. For me, like we said, putting the boots on women and stuff, it was when Jesus came that when they were literally like, oh, if a woman, you can just accuse a female of having an affair and murder her, and that's like okay. That he was he just reminds me of anyone that basically challenged everything. And people would say that it didn't contradict what's in the Old Testament, but however people were interpreting it, they were believing that they were following the Bible to women can't do this. You stone them if they have an affair or if they're accused of having an affair. And Jesus, as we know, the famous scene when they were about to stone her, he's like, he who hasn't sinned cast the first stone, basically saying no one's perfect. And was the first one that I know of that started like speaking to other tribes and other countries that people weren't supposed to, like they were so racist and prejudiced. And this is where my heart opened up, is like he stood for this love and this God that broke down all these barriers and just flipped what all the scholars and everything was saying on its head. And that's where I found that I believe that he was crucified, because he went so far like against the grain at the time. And I get what you're saying too. Like there's stuff where it's like, oh, that's convenient, where human beings can add in that this is there and that's not. But something else that I always was curious, I'm like, if especially the New Testament, if it was like written by man and stuff and pre-planned, I'm like, I think they would have done a better job of not making a lot of the people so like ignorant. The people that were like literally with Jesus questioning him half the time, like, bro, I don't know if you can do this miracle. And Jesus is like, dude, you just saw me yesterday turn water into wine. And I'm like, if they really, if I was writing a story, I'm like, I want everyone to believe this, I would make the people not like is questionable. It's like they have so many characteristics where the humanity in it is what like always drew me. And like even one thing in the Old Testament that uh, David and Goliath kills Goliath, a man after God's own heart. I'm like, if you're pre-writing this to be the perfect person after God's own heart, then he becomes king. You're gonna like have the story end perfectly, but then he goes off to see he's watching this lady bathe nude, has an affair with her, has her husband killed.
Hmm.
It's like, but then goes on to to keep praying to God and coming back to God like with a humanity. And God's like, this is a man after my own heart. And it's like finding all these human flaws is, to me, showed so much of like the beautiful struggle that, and I'm not going off everything you guys are talking about, which is factual stuff. I'm just talking from my own experience of ways where I drew and continue to draw my own conclusions. And I'm much more about my relationship with God personally, with Jesus and God. It's the same over worshiping the religion, because so many people can, as we all know, that's wars are created, slaves are there's so many horrible things that have been done in the name of religion. And it's sad. And that's where Jesus comes back into the game to me. I'm talking you guys to me, to where he was like the one that was like gathering all these people of all these, like, what are you doing? Like, we're supposed to be here helping each other. This is about loving each other and coming together. Like, you're killing them because they eat meat on Tuesday and they don't eat bacon on Sunday. And you're literally like murdering each other. It's so messed up. So I get where people look at different organized religion and stuff, and they're like, this is horrible. Like, on behalf of Christians, I'm like, I'm fully apologetic for what was it, the Crusades. It's like in the name of Catholicism, there's so many horrible things that human beings have done. And I'm speaking as someone that I would call myself a Christian, and I'm just letting everyone know that I'm open, critical thinker, and how I've continued to find my own beliefs, because I never sat here ignorantly and was like, nope, throughout history they've all been perfect. It's like through the Crusades, they went through and committed genocide, rape, some of the most awful stuff, wearing these huge crosses. And I'm like, but God wasn't with them. They said he was, but that's why I also believe in the devil. And I don't believe he's this dude with a pitchfork and a red tail. I think it's more comes, in energy and thoughts, and comes in people, and is like, oh, talks to this guy who's rising in power. You should start conquering that other country in the name of, and do it in the name of God. And then, that's the way I look at things. So anyway, go ahead. I had to just throw in.
Yeah. I mean, there's a really great resource written by a friend of mine, John Dixon. It's a book called Bullies and Saints, where he goes through a lot of the instances of we're obviously going to find abuses, and every human being is going to find a way to exploit whatever is presented to them. So in one sense, I think we can say, isn't it convenient that God used the masculine plural pronoun, or sorry, the masculine pronoun. I keep saying plural, it's just a mistake. The masculine pronoun.
Okay, guys, yes, I'm counting. That was the third time. He knows he fumbled. He knows that I'm listening. Or someone like me is out there. There's a bunch of people like me out there that know the truth. And he can't, to me, if there is such a thing as Satan, because they just brought the idea of Satan up, Satan was known as the accuser, and also like the one that kind of brings a veil over the truth, a liar, right? And I'm not saying that this guy's a liar or he's part of Satan, but he has some characteristics that are very similar. Because, like I said, if you haven't looked it up yourself yet, go onto YouTube and type in God in the plural form. Look at Genesis, read Genesis. Created in our image. Okay? Just look at it and you'll see for yourself that God refers to God's self in the plural form, us, they, and them, throughout the entire thing. The only people, which for a linguist I think is strange, that he's saying masculine singular. So that means that he has an agenda. This is propaganda. This is an agenda. This is not the truth. Because the truth is, if you're going to use the basis of the Bible as the basis, then you have to use the actual terminologies that are being used there and the actual words. For a linguist, I find that very odd, but he did make the mistake 3 times. Okay, masculine plural. He said, that's not what I meant. Yes, it is. You know the truth. You're just giving everybody else a false narrative here.
And we can say, oh, sure, that's convenient, maybe, but it is how he has revealed himself to us, and it's not his fault if we abuse that. I mean, we could say, so I grew up in the Middle East. My parents worked in Amman, Jordan, and when I was living in the Middle East, there was a country called the Democratic Republic of Iraq. Now, just because democracy exists and people are going to name things democratic when they obviously aren't, doesn't mean we then judge democracy. I mean, think of the Democratic Republic of North Korea, right? Nobody thinks that that's an actual representation of democracy. So people are always going to abuse terms and ideas and concepts. The difference is, though, I think historically within Judeo-Christianity, you have this ethic that we were talking about before that I think is fundamentally different than what we find in things like the Enuma Elish, the Atrasis, and other things, in that we are created in the image of God. And actually, one of the earliest criticisms of Christianity are by individuals like Celsus, who is a Greco-Roman philosopher in the 2nd century, where he accused Christianity of being foolish, dishonorable, and stupid, and he called it the religion of slaves, women, and children. Why? Not because God used the masculine pronoun for himself and people were abusing that, because the concept that Christians believed in of everybody, no matter what your gender, your race, your social standing, Paul says, in Christ there is no slave nor free, there is no Jew nor Gentile, there is no Scythian or barbarian, there's no male nor female. These things united people. And we can see there's a historian named Rodney Stark. And in his book, The Rise of Christianity, he actually says that you can track empirically the agency of women across the ancient world by the movement of Christianity. So that, in other words, whenever an area became populated by Christians, we see a direct correlation with the privileges and treatments of women that expand in time when the surrounding culture largely didn't view women as being fully human. So I think we're always going to have abuses, but if there's one worldview that exists that gives agency to people and says that everybody has worth by nature of being just human, it's the Christian worldview. And that's where I think it's very different. So we can argue about why we think God should or shouldn't have revealed himself in his pronouns, but I think that's actually irrespective of the historical reality that we see within the impact of Christianity, particularly on the West, but around the world, and how it gives agency to the marginalized.
Okay, I'm not going to speak from, let's say, anthropologically from the beginning of society or anything like that. But if we were to look at that, let's just say hypothetically, if we were to look at that between the way men and women were treated, if you base it just solely off the science of it all, which he's not doing, none of them here are actually basing it off the science. Women were dependent on men for survival. That's really what it came down to in the past. We are dependent on each other, males and females, for the survival of our species. Okay? And if you were to see the first movements of women's rights started with the World War, I think it's World War II, I believe, and I could be wrong here, but I believe it was World War II when they started, when women's rights started coming into play, and I believe, I could be wrong here on the exact, I'm not really big into war, that's why, and it was with Susan B. Anthony and other people, women staying at home and working. They became more independent when they didn't have to have a man around because they were all fighting a war, and they started establishing themselves. So The reality was that it wasn't Christianity. It was the idea of war and the lack of men that made women more independent. Okay, and that's a reality that was due to the circumstances. Had nothing else. That there was no religion involved in that. It was a circumstantial event that happened, and or circumstantial causes that happened, and that's the reason they became more and more divided as well. And more women wanted to go to work after that, and realizing they could do that they could go to work because they became so independent by being by themselves, while the men were off fighting in the war. So, he just wanted to state that Christianity was the reason that women were kind of like now getting more freedoms. No, it had nothing to do with Christianity, and that's the truth. Like I said, everything he's saying now, I realize there's a lot of propaganda behind it. He's trying to perpetuate Christian ideology, and I find that interesting because he also brought not only these ideas up that we recently spoke about, but he's kind of threw in the mix North Korea and Iraq and all these areas, and the democracy and all this other stuff. And like I said, words are very interesting, and if they're jumping into all these words and stating all these things, you have to really be wary here on what's really happening. Why is he bringing all these things up? Like, I almost feel like he's reading off of a prompt at times, like, add this here or add that here. You never know. Let me tell you, there are shills in everything now, and a lot of them, if you can get a human shill to work, you're good. But they have AI, artificial intelligence, and they can work as for whoever is in control of them. But let me not go too far out, but that's just wanted to state that as well.
Wes, can I ask you one? So because I'm always interested in this, like you were raised Christian. I always think about this, like my wife who's Muslim, and our beliefs at the core are so similar, but there's some differences. And I wonder, like, if I was born in Sierra Leone, West Africa, where she was, I know in the Bible says Christ revealed, but C.S. Lewis is someone that I really respect because I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a think outside the box always, and we should be. No one should just be like sheep and follow what any of us are saying. Like, do your research on your own with everything, of course. But what led you, sorry, going back to C.S. Lewis real quick. He was a famous scholar who was once an atheist, set out on a journey to basically disprove the Bible. As he went to do that, he himself found out that to be like one of the most historically accurate written books, which really shocked him. He then became a Christian after that. He's done the Narnia movies, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or their books. They weren't movies when he passed away. But he has an amazing... I love people like him because he doesn't just act like... He always was questioning everything. He's like, why is there this going? Why are these little kids dying, God, when they're... But something that he continued to come up with, which reminded me so much of Jesus and the love conquers all things too, is when so many people overly get caught up on religion over the relationship. And he's like, I've actually met some atheists that are closer to God without even knowing it. And I've met some Christians that are further away from God without even knowing it. And I believe that too so much. And I'm just really curious, like, as you went on your journey as being like a historian, studying biblical text, and then being raised, of the church, did you take it? I don't want to put what, because did you take it upon like whatever I continue to discover, I'm going to have to accept, like, say something you did find when you were in Egypt revealed differently than what you were taught, like, did you kind of tell yourself, I'm going on a quest, like searching for truth without like a set conclusion to prove Christianity? knowing that it could go either way. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a bit of an unusual household in that my mom grew up in India, and my parents, when I was younger, I was born in Pakistan, and I spent a portion of my childhood in Jordan. I grew up in majority Muslim countries and surrounded by majority Muslim environments.
Hmm.
And we had, a copy of the Quran in the room. In fact, we had the Bhagavad Gita and the Book of Mormon, and for a little while, other documents in our house. These were things that my parents, although they never verbally said, these Christianity is true, therefore these are not forbidden. These are not verboten. The truth, capital T truth, of the reality of the world we behold can stand up against scrutiny and investigation. And I did do a great deal of that as a kid. My dad is a historian as well. He has a doctorate, and I grew up on him, reading the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. But at the exact same time, the reason why I actually went to university with full intention of going into the police force,
Oh, wow.
but it was interactions with Muslims and Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and atheists and accusations against the credibility of the Bible, which actually piqued my interest, because they would say things that I thought, if that's true, of course that undermines what I believe. I believe that Jesus is God incarnate. If I can't trust the Gospels as reliable first century eyewitness testimony, then I might as well throw all of this away, because I'm not going to believe a lie, even if it's a convenient lie. And so it was actually the exploration.
Okay, this is something interesting to me, and I wish now that I had a chance to be in this debate. Why? Because he mentioned the Quran. He also mentioned the Bhagavad Gita, which I happen to know a little bit about myself. And I'd like to see how he invalidates these more ancient. Well, the Quran came 500 years or 1500 years, I believe, ago, right? So that's 500 years after the Bible and was written. And if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, it goes back a few thousand years, 2 to 3,000 years or more before the Bible. So how does he? He said he kind of like would put the truth up against the truth being the Bible, that God is Jesus incarnated, right? So how would he substantiate that against, in comparison, to make it more simple and less volatile, with the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, which are even older, and these ancient books and scriptures? I'd like to see how he would go about that. I'm curious now, but he doesn't state it. This is something they should have gotten into. Like, if you're claiming that that's the truth, and you just mentioned these other guys here, these other religions, and you had the copies in your house, you said, then hey, give us a little bit of it. I want to hear it, because I want to know how you can invalidate a more ancient religion than your own. And look, I get everybody has opinions, perspectives, and they all have the right to have that. But if you're gonna come down on a guy like Billy Carson, and the way they're doing it as well, they're basically indirectly attacking him, which I think was a strategic move. I don't think this was an accident at all. I think it was very strategically done. It was masterfully done. Now that I'm watching it. But if you listen to the things I'm saying, if I don't make any sense at any time, somebody call me out on it. But I guarantee you, as we're going through this, I'm going to make plenty of sense, guys. I might end this one soon and start back tomorrow and finish up, because I'm getting kind of tired. But let's look a little bit further here, guys.
Eventually going into graduate college, and then now in working on my PhD, the largest secular university in Canada, that got me thinking, okay, how do we investigate these things? What are the methodologies by which we go about to explore the origins and credibility of something like the Bible? And that investigation, with all due respect to Billy and the content that you put out, has actually confirmed what I believe. I'm dealing with the actual manuscripts. I travel to academic institutions, to other countries, and I look at these things and I read them. And it's a privilege to be able to learn languages like Greek and Coptic and Hebrew and Aramaic and dig into these things. And I think ultimately, I really appreciate what you said there, Mark, with your articulation of your personal relationship. And I think that's so important. But I think it's all.
So this is something interesting. He says that he studied uh, all these different languages, but yet when he made the mistake 3 times, multiple times, about the masculinity of God and the singular form, okay, the masculinity in singular form, but he kept saying masculinity in plural form, okay, and in the actual Hebrew and Aramaic and Arabic, they all have the plural form. There's no masculine or feminine, and he even admits that there's no gender identity to it as well. He admits that, but yet he still says that he believes that it all states the masculine singular, which completely makes no sense at all. He's contradicting himself when he says that. If he did study the Hebrew and he did study the Aramaic, then he should know the word Elohim. He should know that they use it in our image and not his or hers, in ours, in they, them. So it doesn't make any sense here. So that's why I'm confused. I just wish that he would clarify, if he knows something, clarify it to us and make us understand why you're using those terms, in the way that you're using them. Is there something that you read that we don't know of, but he hasn't stated anything like that yet, and I'm waiting.
Also important to remember that relationship is based on something that's real and verifiable. And we can look into the evidence. I have friends who are linguists, philologists, and historians. And when we look into these things and we talk with one another and we're discussing, we're constantly trying to falsify our theories, because that's what good history does. We're looking for the falsification. You don't go in, ideally, if you want to be a good historian,
Right.
with trying to prove your original thesis. You go in and say, okay, what are the avenues that actually could disprove this? And then how do we engage with those in an appropriate and articulate manner? So what I believe is true, but I believe it based on the evidence of the actual documentation. I've read a lot of the literature that you're talking about, Billy, the Enuma Elish, the Atrahasis, the Bhagavad Gita, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I've read some of them in their original languages because I've tried to be a good historian and go back into the primary sources. Or if I can't, engage with people like my friends who are Assyriologists, who are philologists, and try to not just go off of a translation, but the original. And I think I've found largely the opposite of the conclusions that you have made, Billy. And I know that you are very passionate about what you talk about, and I respect that. I just think that the confidence might not actually be backed up by the reality of the evidence. So when we're looking at something like the Sinai Bible, when we're looking at something like the Gospel of Barnabas, when we're looking at something like the Gospel of Jesus' wife, these are things that actually have provenance that we can verify. And ultimately, I think the answers to the questions of the legitimacy or the illegitimacy of those things point to not just a different conclusion, but actually the opposite conclusion, and that Christianity is true.
Well, now I'm glad you said that. So those 3 topics are a very small piece of my concept and idea of what really happened in the ancient past. So that's a very small fraction. That's less than 0.1%. You talk about eyewitness accounts convinced you
I don't mean to cut you off here, Billy, but I had to address what Wesley just kind of, I guess, clarified for us. He's saying that all the other texts are the reason that he believes that the Bible is true. Now, it's one thing to make a statement, and he, as a linguist and a guy getting a PhD, should know that. You're in a debate right now. Making a huge statement like that, knowing that there are billions of people around the world, they're probably not watching this, but there are a lot of people, there are billions literally, that have beliefs on these certain ideas, ideologies, or philosophies, or what religions, or whatever you want to call them. They have very strong feelings for these things. And for you to kind of like invalidate these ideas by making that statement, I don't want to use the word offensive, but I want to say that it's with a lack of tactfulness in the way that you stated that, because you give nothing to corroborate why you would say that. And this is the problem that I keep saying from the very beginning. He makes these wild statements of his own opinions, and he does nothing to corroborate it. You know, and when I say corroborate, when you corroborate something, especially I have never really gone into any debates with anyone on TV or anything like that, but I would assume having a conversation and being courteous to the people who may have differing beliefs, that you would kind of say something to buffer the situation so you don't offend anyone. He's saying it just plain outright that that's the reason that I believe that this is the truth, completely invalidating the other religions around the world. So this is a very big problem here, you know. And I'm saying these things so you guys can see what we're dealing with here and be very aware of it. But let's look further, see what Billy has to say. Again, I apologize, Mr. Carson. Let's listen to what you have to say.
That Christianity is real. There's been eyewitness accounts of every culture that I've visited around this entire planet, and their eyewitness accounts of what they experienced is 100,000% opposite of what's in the Bible. People have
Based on what do you mean? Can you give me an example?
The Dogon tribe, for example, in Mali, Africa. They experienced a culture that they claim came to this planet from Sirius B. They have the evidence that they knew these beings were from Sirius B because they have the instruments that show the orbit of a trinary star system that we couldn't discover until the 1970s with our modern technology. Okay, they understood not only the orbital pattern of Sirius A, B, and C, but even that B was a failed star, which you can't see it from Earth with the naked eye. They knew that it was a white dwarf. They even knew that they said that if you took a tablespoon of it, the entire tribe or 1,000 men couldn't lift the tablespoon. They understood mass and gravity as well. They were told the shape, the sizes, and the colors of all the planets in our solar system, which they recorded. And there's only one wisdom keeper, and that person can never be touched by a person. If they get touched by another person, they'd actually be killed. And then they eventually have a mentee that they break down that verbally handed down knowledge to. And that next person then takes over and becomes the wisdom keeper. And they've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. And science, modern science, has found all their information to be 1,000% accurate. Then you have the Hopi tribe of the Americas, indigenous tribes, Hopi tribe, Lakota tribe, also having engagements with these quote unquote star brothers, even having an account of them being taken underground, which you don't see just only in America. I just came back from Turkey. You have the people from Turkey in Mesopotamia also being taken underground into a place called Derinkuyu by these beings, by these people, a structure that's built 12 stories deep underground, that's made out of volcanic tuff, a very soft stone. And if you don't know what you're doing, it'll actually collapse. There's no evidence of any collapse. And it was thousands of years old. It was reused many times. So the mainstream story about what it was used for to hide from Romans is actually false. This place is ancient. And in order to build it, you actually have to have foreknowledge of how to construct this type of an underground civilization that can hold 20 to 30,000 people, places for livestock, places for worship, with no sign of collapse, then you have to have hundreds of ventilation shafts. And I've been down there. Those ventilation shafts cut through solid rock all the way down to the core. And there's even more. It links to other underground cities that are miles and miles away. As you get to the very base of this area, you can cut through and go to another location. But again, these people were taken under. Also, then you have the ancient Egyptians. Similar story. Major catastrophe comes. These people come and take them underground. Then you have the information in the Egyptian book of Going Forth by Day. More accounts by people, our ancestors, that have accounts that do not match up with the biblical text. And so all of a sudden we're saying that all these cultures, the Aboriginal people, I can go into them as well. I've gone to walkabouts
Do you mind?
in Outback, in the Outback,
Yeah.
and the Aboriginal elders, same thing. They were seated here by Pleiadians. This is their verbal handed on history for thousands of years. And I can go around the world and I can come up with all this information from all these eyewitness accounts from people that should be respected, dignified, and shouldn't be scoffed. And that we're now saying that all this information that they put forward, all their verbal handed on history, all their written history, that's got to go to the side, because this one text is 1,000% accurate.
Sure, but so my question is, most of that is oral history, correct?
Oh, it's all oral history, even the Bible.
Okay, so when we're engaging with oral history, what methodologies are you using to confirm that the orality is accurate?
Oh man. Well, first and foremost,
Okay, that's kind of like a cheap shot. I'm just going to be upfront and blunt about it. So this is showing the ludicrousness of where Wesley Huff is going right now. He's talking about the orality. So basically, he's saying he's saying that what methods did you use to show that the oral lineage of this message is are you able to prove that it's authentic in any way whatsoever? But Billy Carson said that it's the same thing with the Bible, and he's correct. He's correct 100%. Everything is by word of mouth. Even though they wrote it on paper, people heard it from someone, and we know who those people are. If we read the Bible, we know they had the apostles that went and told the stories to everyone, and they put it in written form. In ancient India, the tradition of yoga is an oral tradition that was passed down from the ancient lineages, close to 6,000 plus years ago, which has not been watered down. It's the exact same thing today in its original form, unless you go to the Western world where they make up stuff and add to it and try to incorporate it into the ancient system. But the ancient system is the pure ancient system is not known by just anyone. You have to have a teacher that has been through a lineage that comes a successive, I guess, or you want to say lineage, that has been passed down, from the ancestors, and there's a difference here, and I want to see how he tries to make this argument here, Wesley, by the orality, what he means by that, because right now it's kind of an interesting thing, because he has to use the same exact argument for the Bible as well. So I want to hear what he has to say. I'm very curious now.
foremost, some of these texts some of these cultures have written down information in caves. You've got cave paintings. The Dogon tribe actually have not only written down.
Sure. No, I don't disagree with that. The question is one of historic. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. The question is one of methodological analysis. So you have to have a method by which you can find either that something is falsifiable or that there are avenues by which you can show internal and external accuracy of credibility. So this is what we do with documents. This is what we do with the ancient Gospels. This is what I do. I've worked on Xenophon and Plutarch. And we look at the internal evidences and the external multivalent corroboration to try to figure out.
Okay, guys, I'm going to point it out if you haven't picked up on the pattern yet. When he wants to make himself sound legitimate, he uses very large words. Do you think the average person listening to this is going to understand any part of what he's saying just now? Even I'm having a hard time picking up and understanding what he's saying. When he used the word methodologies and then he started using Plutarch and all these other things, I'm assuming, okay, those are languages that he had, methodologies that he used for those ancient languages or forms of languages. And, that's the only thing I can pick up. I can only go from the context of how he says it and what he's saying. Most people aren't going to pick up on these things. The average person is not going to know. But you can use the most complex words to try and make your argument sound, like it's the answer, or it's just because it's such a complicated sentence that you use. But it doesn't mean anything if nobody understands it. You have to speak when you're talking on a level to the entire community here on YouTube or whoever's watching YouTube, the audience. You have to speak in layman's terms, because if you study statistically how many people have a bachelor's or a master's, there's a very low percentage of people in the United States and in the world that carry a bachelor's or a master's, especially a master's or a PhD. Do you understand? So that's why I believe that he's doing this to try and establish himself as an authority, and I'm pretty sure that's what he's doing. He's trying to make himself established that way by his status and his accolades of academia, and that's what this is. And it kind of turns me off in a way, and I kind of see now that it's just kind of strange. It's very odd, But let's take a look further, see what he says here.
Okay, yes, we have all these stories. Great. I don't deny that. But as a historian, as someone who's trying to figure out what is accurate, how do you know if I use the term verisimilitude, do you know what that term means?
No, but I can tell you this. Tell me how the Dogon tribe saw Sirius B, knew the orbit of Sirius B, a trinary star system, accurately, and can show you the orbit with a special tool that they made that was given to them by these people. How do they know the shapes, the sizes, the colors, and the orbital pattern of all these planets in our solar system and other star alignments that they would use to have something called the Ziggy and planet and their own harvesting and planting and so forth and so on? That's not enough evidence that there's something.
Well, I'm not aware of that particular case. And even, I would grant that, the ancient people are far more technological advanced than we give themselves credit for. Just because they're ancient doesn't mean they're stupid. I am well aware, as someone who has done both investigation in the past and done archaeological analysis, that is a reality. My question is simply, okay, you have these stories or you have these accounts, you're referring to them as eyewitness testimony. How are you going about verifying that as that?
Well, if the people had eyewitness testimony about Jesus, they then just wrote down their eyewitness testimony on a piece of paper or parchment paper or papyrus. So these people...
Right. So that's where internal methodological analysis...
Some of it's actually written down. So, it's the same exact thing. There's really no difference.
Well, no. So you do internal investigations to figure out when something was dated. So something like so when I use that term verisimilitude before, that's something we as historians are looking for. It's a term that simply means the appearance or likelihood of truthfulness. So when you do historical analysis, it's an inference to the best explanation. So you have proof and you have data, and you're extrapolating that data on levels of probability. So some things can be confirmed as high probabilistically true, and other things are lower in their probability that they happened. But there are different methodologies, different ways that you explore historically how that happens. So for the Gospels, you look at...
With the Dogon tribe, scientists went there to visit the tribe, and they still have no answers because they used their modern science. They took the best scholars to visit these people, and they're still scratching their heads. Something happened there.
Sure. And I'm not even
So I was listening very closely to what Wesley's trying to establish here. So basically, right now, I'm pretty sure that because I was doing my degree in physics, but I transferred over now to a master's in cybersecurity. After I finish this master's, I'll probably jump right back into the physics program. But when I was in the physics program, we spoke about methodologies, forms of research, and there were different types of methodologies that they used for research, which dealt with inference and probability. And this was a stated fact that not one of them was completely accurate. They were all equally, if not equal, about the same in coming up with a plausible answer. The only real, I would say personally, the only real way of getting any kind of truth, because he used the word, trying to figure out what is the truth is what he's saying in layman's terms, coming the closest to the truth as possible. But then again, you have to establish the basis of what is truth. Right? You have to establish what the truth is. So if he's talking about methodologies and all this other stuff, the probabilities and inferences. Like I said, in physics, they do that all the time. That's how they try to prove their hypothesis. That's how they try to do it, is by using these methodologies. There's quite a few different methods as well. So none of them are foolproof. None of them are going to give you 100% accuracy. They're all going to have a very high rate of inconsistency, and for him to try and bring methodologies into this conversation, I kind of find it disturbing in the fact that he's dealing with a person that doesn't deal with methodologies. He's dealing with someone who's an educated man, obviously, and he's traveled the world, and he's gotten his evidence in his mind. Just like Wes says that he knows for a fact in his mind that he believes in the Bible because he basically insubstantiated every other religion in the world based on his own belief. He's not giving Billy Carson that same privilege, that same prerogative. He's not giving him that, and I think that's completely unfair. And you guys, if I didn't say this, you wouldn't get to hear this. And most likely, if there is a real agenda against what I'm saying, they're going to block this broadcast, because I believe this is why they don't. This is why my videos don't go out, is because I can pretty much put up a stance against a lot of these guys. I'm pointing out to you exactly what's going on here. If you listen closely to what I'm saying, you'll see that he's trying to establish a basis based on his status, his accolades of academia, and now he's using some real high scientific methods of trying to prove the truth with people who have probably not been studied in these areas, and even if they were, they're still not 100% accurate. So this is a shame, and that he's doing this. Now I can see that this is completely out of place.
Denying that necessarily, but the question is, okay, we need different levels of evidence and exploration, not just scientifically but historically, to derive something as eyewitness testimony. Now we have mountains of that, and I'm more than willing to go into some of that with the Gospels as early eyewitness testimony that can be verified externally and internally. But nonetheless, the only reason I ask, Billy, is because I've listened to a fair amount of your content, and I'm unaware of the methods that you use to try to discern between what is an accurate source historiographically and an inaccurate source historiographically.
Well,
Does that make sense?
I use getting in an airplane and traveling to these places, doing my own research, talking with the indigenous cultures, and researching as much of the text that is available that I can possibly find.
Okay, so I don't dispute that, and I do believe you have done that.
Let me reiterate one more time. He has to use that same basis for his belief in his idea of Christianity, and also the insubstantiation of other religions, because that's what he did. It was almost being extremely derogatory to all the other forms of religion out there by saying, yeah, because of reading that stuff, it's proven to me that the Bible's real. But yet, he has no way of establishing a basis of truth except for his own faith and his own belief. And he's not mentioning that here, but he's putting Billy on the spot for the same exact idea. Guys, trust me, there's something wrong here. Most people would not have caught on to this unless there was someone like me telling you.
But I mean, even from what we've talked about, so you've researched the text, but when we talked about the crucifixion, everything you cited was either, and I mean with all due respect, false in terms of the Sinai Bible, because Codex Sinaiticus is just a 4th century Greek manuscript of the Gospels that we have today, or they were verified forgeries in terms of the Gospel of Jesus' wife and the Gospel of Barnabas.
You may be right on that particular part of the topic, but like I said, that's less than 0.1% of the information that I hold.
Sure, but that was the original question. So yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, okay, well, so I'm going off of what we've already talked about. So you've said you explore the text. I don't deny that. But the evidence, by going off of what you have put forward in terms of the actual documentary evidence, is not just less than convincing in my respect. And I mean this with respect, because I think you have done a lot of research. You've traveled to these places. I have too. Like, this is what I do as my career. But I'm not really getting indication, because in history, we go to the primary sources in their primary languages. And when Mark asked, okay, why do you deny the crucifixion? The sources you used were not primary.
Okay, we're still talking about the same thing over and over again. There's so much more we can talk about here. We're wasting a lot of time. There's so much more. That's this amount.
Do you guys
There's so much more stuff to talk about?
Do you think that all these different cultures and stuff describing these other beings, could those have been, I'm not an expert theology or whatever, but like where it talks about war, I always want to personally ask you this too, where in the Bible it talks about like wars between the demons and the angels. There's a lot of crazy stuff in the Bible too, that you can prove it's been written, but it also takes some faith, because you can't physically see where there was wars between demons and angels and stuff fighting in the heavens. So there's tons going on, obviously. Could any of those have been, like, from what you've discovered or how people have written it, do you think those could have been demons or angels?
I don't believe in demons or angels at all.
You don't believe in them at all?
Nah, I don't believe in demons and angels. When you read Azazel coming down in the book of Enoch, coming down, and the first thing he does is teach people how to make knives and swords so they can cut a man's head off. You read, you see these quote unquote.
Where's that in the book of Enoch?
In the book of Enoch, Azazel. He comes down and he teaches.
Where's that in the book of Enoch? Is it? The only reason I ask is because there are 2 Enochs, first Enoch and second Enoch, and only first Enoch is an actual historical amalgamation.
Okay. And then you analyze the fact that these angels are having sex, they're getting drunk. These are just people.
Whoa. Where are angels getting drunk?
Angels party, they go, they hang out with people, they go to war with people, they put on their outfits and go to war with people. This is
where are they getting drunk though?
They get married, okay? Whatever that means. But they're having.
They don't get married.
Okay. Not
in fact, Scripture says that angels can't get married.
Merry Christmas.
Not married. Mary, Merry. But the point that I'm making here is, when you start to really analyze what these angels are doing, and you start to analyze how many people are dying in the biblical text, you start to say, well, how many people did Satan actually kill? And when you start doing the tally on the numbers, God's doing most of the killing in the Bible. It's not the devil that's doing all the killing. And then God says in Isaiah, I created the good and I created the evil. Do what I say at the Lord. So he's saying that he's doing the good and the evil. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
My personal opinion on this whole thing, I just let me get this out because we keep going over the same rhetoric over and over again. My personal opinion is that the biblical text is a good book. Like I've said, I've got videos. My number one video on Twitter has me saying this. It's good text, because if you actually apply some of the information that's in the Bible, you can get a good result, like you have done, Mark.
Right.
You can get a good
I
result.
struggle with I know, I want you to finish your thought. Go ahead.
Yeah. So because you can get a good result, but there's a lot of misinformation in the Bible. There's a lot of false information that's copied from ancient text. And if you go by that text, all of a sudden you end up with 400 years of slavery. You end up with abuse. You end up with divide and conquer tactics that separate people. You end up with people thinking that they're the chosen ones and they're the chosen people, and we've been promised this promised land so we can eradicate another race of people because this is our land, because God promised it to us. You have people that want to go on the papal inquisitions and torture and kill and murder over 80 million people. You have the American Holocaust, 111 million indigenous natives slayed. You have all this going on because of this text, which is set up so contradictory throughout its path across time. You get into the New Testament, slavery is still being condoned in the New Testament.
Was it?
Honor thy slave master as you would honor God or Jesus, it says, I believe. So in Ephesians.
Well, it doesn't. It doesn't say that. But
the God of the Old Testament too, like I'll let you go real quick, but I'm just, and I know you have to go soon too, but I'm speaking as I challenge my own subject. It was always, I'm telling you guys, this is where Jesus came in and changed everything for me. But like the Old Testament too, it is hard for me to read even Noah thinking God's like mad at everyone. Let's flood the whole world and murder all these people that I created.
That's pretty bad stuff.
But it seems so contradictory to, and I'm speaking, Wes, as a Christian, and I don't have the, whatever they're called, papyrus. There isn't. This is where people, but I continue to follow in my heart, but it's so, Jesus did not seem like that at all. But they say God's the same as then as he was now, like time, he created time. So he didn't come down, as Jesus and change and evolve and then come back with new information and be like, you know what, I don't think I'm going to flood and do. So these are more, I guess, like bigger moral questions that there's not necessarily, but that's where things like the Old Testament challenge me at times. And I know there's a lot of things where they correlate, and I've seen some cool things that come together too, but it's just like, man, to think like I'm going to flood and murder all these people that I created and then leave a few alive doesn't seem like what Jesus did at all.
Sorry to interrupt you, but there's a couple more points I want to make because he got a lot of talking in. It did say, slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear as sincerity of heart as you would obey Christ. That's slaves. Obey your earthly masters with respect and fear with sincerity in your heart, just as you would obey Christ. So it does say that in Ephesians 6:5, but there's so many aspects.
That stuff is what.
And what is the context of what Ephesians is saying? So I think this is very important because we don't take text in isolation. So within Scripture, and this is why all the abolition movements throughout history have only been Judeo-Christian movements. There's never been an abolition movement that wasn't Christian. And actually, there's the recent work by historian Tom Holland, not the Spider-Man actor, different Tom Holland, but his recent Dominion highlights this fact very well. This is not a Christian, but in it, he shows that going right back into the antiquity with the Cappadocian Fathers was the first abolition movement, and then into the British and the American abolition movements. These were fundamentally Christian movements ran by Christians because of the idea that when Paul, who wrote that letter to Ephesians, says, in Christ there is no slave nor free, he's breaking down those barriers. So in Ephesians, when he says, slaves obey your masters, he's operating on the socioeconomic context of what he's going on. And he's saying, hey, we have slaves and we have free people, okay? If you're a believing slave, if you're a slave who believes in Jesus as the Messiah, don't be equitable in how you are living your life. Reflect Christ accurately. And that's a movement that he is fundamentally working towards, that eventually starts to completely take out the legs from the slave movement in general.
I love, by the way, I love that we're all. This is respectful. I don't feel this is all just
Yeah.
three
It's all love.
grown-ups
It's all
talking
love.
in
I
a healthy
appreciate
way.
this. I appreciate Wes.
And I think this is going to give us. But this is where you and I sitting down in the room. I would be like, great that you came to that, but like, what were the methodologies did you use to conclude that him saying the slave be the master to the slave, you're able to interpret it meaning that he's meaning that? Because I was also raised in the church, and I would question when they're like, oh, in the old days when they said women don't wear jewelry, that's a sin. You would know the exact verse.
Yes.
And then they're like, oh, but
Yeah.
So before he goes any further, if you study history and you look at the what they call manifest destiny now, if you're not familiar with the term, is basically that they believe that wherever they went they can conquer and just take the land because they manifested it in some way. It was their destiny to do this. It was a very horrible, horrific genocide or excuse for genocide and barbaric behavior by especially the British. They used it to colonialize or conquest over a lot of different countries, and they use strategically. They weaponized the Christian religion and the idea of Jesus, and used it to strategically to convert by the sword. It's either you accept it or you die, and it's not any different from Islam in some instances in history. I think everybody, a lot of the religions are guilty of the same behavior. So, I'm glad that this. I don't know what this guy's name is. That's with the computer, but I like the fact that he interjects his ideas, and I like what he's saying now. He's asking him now what I've been saying the entire earlier in the podcast. Why isn't he using the same methodologies on himself? But he's continuously proposing the idea onto Billy Carson. So I just have to throw that in there. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind.
that was just written because at that time that was what they did. But then the next week they're telling me, but if you believe in the Bible, you either believe in all of it or none of it. I'm like, well, how come you're just?
Yes.
And they're like, but it's okay for women to do that. Now, those are the things where it's like we've got to be honest here. Like, if you're respectfully challenging Billy, Billy's going to go and do
Yes.
research and be like, okay, now I want to see how to have, because we're all critical thinkers. Those things seem to just get so blindly pushed over when they're like, but that doesn't apply now. And it's like,
Right.
I think there's more common ground than people think, and so many words to recall, but also, like, it's weird to me to think that he would be like, women aren't allowed to wear jewelry and this crap. And then Jesus came and he's like, none of that matters. And then for them to be like,
Yeah.
oh, that only made sense then, but now it doesn't apply. But believe everything in
Right.
the
So
Bible
this is what's
all
referred
applies.
to.
You know what? Like,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
a
yeah.
Christian
So this is what's
myself, this is why, like, I'm always like,
Yeah. So there's a discipline called hermeneutics, and that's the methodology of interpretation. So there are multiple levels that you interpret something. So whether we're dealing with, say, the book of Ephesians, or we're dealing with Tacitus's Annals, we look at something and we contextually read it within the framework of how it's being written. So there's a historical approach where we look at the context. Okay, Paul is writing to a church in Ephesus. What's going on in Ephesus, and how is what he's saying in that city in what is modern day Turkey? How does that pertain to that particular time and framework? Where is Paul
how
coming
does
from?
it
Where
pertain to
is
now, though, is my question. Because
Yeah. So
you're giving me,
here's
you're
how I
giving
answer
me,
that question.
and I
Yeah.
love you
So
to death, Wes, but you're starting to give me, sorry to interrupt you. And I believe in God. Like, I believe in
Yeah.
our and Billy believes in God too. I get I get why things are challenged and things need to be challenged, but it's saying that was to women then, but being raised in the church
it's
and
yes
stuff,
and no.
they say, but
Right.
then they'll pick something and they're like, but that doesn't apply to them now, because in that context, he was talking to this certain town
Yeah.
where they were having problems with I'm like, well, that's not written anywhere. And they're like, well, if you go to blah, blah, blah. And then they say, well, God is all knowing, so he perfectly chose what was in and out of the Bible. I believe
Mhm.
whoever created the universe, which is God, in my own opinion, is way smarter than any of us. Why would he leave something like that crap in there, that women shouldn't wear jewelry and all that, and then have in the New Testament that crap doesn't really matter? Like that's where
Yeah.
it's like I have to believe that it's not I do think there is parts where things got written in, and I don't think they're the major things personally, like whether or not Jesus was crucified, which I think is a major thing, because if he wasn't, that I've studied that a lot, that would challenge that would challenge the core of my whole belief system over whether or not it said if women can wear jewelry or something. But I do think that and I
Yeah.
don't know if
So
there's an exact answer to this, but I do think, that's perplexing to me.
No,
that God of all wisdom would choose to leave some of that in there. It's like, why?
Yeah. So here's the thing. So the Bible was written for us, but it wasn't written to us. There is an original audience, whether that's the ancient Israelite in the ancient Near Eastern culture, or whether it's the Greco-Roman believer in Jesus within the city of Ephesus. So as historians, and I mean, most of the books on this end of my shelf are what are referred to as commentaries.
Sorry, I got to
theologians and historians.
Wouldn't God be smart enough to know I'm not just going to write to this demographic of this civilization now, knowing I'm a God who created the whole world, and people are still going to be studying this thousands of years later?
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, but I didn't want to cut it off.
Yes.
So I'm sorry.
No. So
by the way,
here's how I would
I'm
answer
the
that,
worst
Mark.
interrupter ever, and it's more of my ADD type thing of like, I get a thought and I got to get it out, or else I freaking forget it. So I'm sorry about interrupting. Thanks for throwing me under the bus for that.
Yeah. So, how I would answer that is I would say this. So you do have examples of where Paul is writing, and he's writing to a particular group. And so we look at, okay, what does it mean for a woman to wear and adorn themselves with gold in a first century Greco-Roman context, right? It has to do with the fact that prostitutes would wear those things. So we need to ask the question, what is the intention of the text? Yes,
I gotta ask
we can
you again,
take
though,
the meaning.
But how do you interpret that's what I've been, the reason I'm interrupting you is I've heard this. I've been there, done that.
Yes.
I respect the crap out of you for how deep you go into studying the ancient texts and stuff, which is so important for the real root of it all. But they've told me that same thing, and I'm like, but why doesn't it just say that he was speaking to the women and stuff that were prostitutes of that time? Like, where does that correlate?
He's not speaking to prostitutes. He's talking about purity, and he's talking in the context of when he says, don't adorn yourself with jewelry. The original audience, and we can explore this by the historical analysis.
How dumb that sounds? Saying the original audience, then later on saying, but now it's okay for this audience because these women and stuff.
No, because it's the point that he's making.
I get why people like, if we're gonna, we got to be open-minded. We're punching holes in other stuff to punch holes in our own, and even if it's agreeing, like don't you think that's a little? I get what you're saying. Like if prostitutes at that right now, if prostitutes all wear a red band around their neck and that signals what all prostitutes are, and it's like, don't wear that. A lot of
prostitutes have tattoos, and a lot of women who aren't prostitutes have tattoos.
Right. I don't think it's as black and white that only the prostitute, and also you're only talking about in one little town. So my bigger question would be to God,
Well, in Greco-Roman antiquity,
like, why did you put that
Yeah.
in the
so
Bible?
we
That just
take
confuses everyone, though, because
God didn't
all
put that.
these
God
other
didn't.
civilizations are going
I
to be
think we
reading
have
that.
we have something we keep saying here. God didn't put that in the Bible. Men put this stuff in the Bible.
And I think that with some of the old, I'm telling you, Billy, it's for me. I think he'll get back on. If it wasn't for Jesus, sorry, we got you back on, Wes.
Yeah.
I
I
need to
understand what
sign
you're
you.
saying, Mark, but what I'm saying is I think we're missing a big point here. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the Bible is written by people, men who are extremely flawed. And the evidence of that is what they did, what they took the information that's in that biblical text and what they did with it globally to other human beings, and how they even wrote about it in the Bible, how they enslaved and tortured people in the biblical text. So in that case, even in the book of Deuteronomy, which is one of the most brutal books out there, where everything is given okay to rape women, kill children. If one person talks against your Lord, go to that town and kill the whole town, burn the town down.
So brutal.
It's
In
just
the
too
Old
much. Like I
Testament,
said,
or turns people into salt
the
and
killing
stuff.
the killing in the Bible is not being done by Satan. That's why I'm saying I don't care about. I don't believe in demons and all this other kind of stuff. Moses goes to the top. He talks to God. He gets his tablet. The first commandments are, "Thou shalt not kill." He comes down. As soon as he sees the people making a golden calf, he kills most of them. It's just like, come on. It's just ridiculous.
And I've learned with some of these.
So I just want to say, it's great that they're pointing out all these contradictions because this needs to be pointed out. Unfortunately, the way this video has been marketed, which I can understand why Billy Carson's so upset, is that people have taken this and marketed it to try to really discredit him in his own element. And if you listen to what Billy Carson's video in his I guess you want to say rebuttal against this whole idea that he doesn't know what he doesn't know what he's talking about. Remember, he just came out of the hospital. He was almost dying of pneumonia, whatever the case was. You could look at him and see that he doesn't look well. He doesn't look himself here in this video. The way his eyes look, everything about him looks like he's really sick. And I kind of feel very wary about this guy Wes now, because he seems to be really pushing the agenda of the Bible and Christianity and trying to make excuses for quite a few things here, which to me is more dangerous than the two things that he pointed out about the Codec of Sinai and the what was the other one? I guess Gospel of Barnabas, or whatever it was about Barnabas. I guess that was the other one. He said that those two were both forgeries. So those two, by him using that as a context to make a speculation, unknowingly that they were forgeries, it doesn't really take away from anything, because I've done that. Plenty of people have done that. Who hasn't done that? That's why they established what you call fact checking on Facebook. So you have millions of people doing that, and that's why fact checking on Facebook was established. So, and that goes across the board to each and everyone. There were plenty of people with PhDs and everything else, making these same, statements without having any real factual evidence behind it. But we're all guilty of it. That's why they have fact checking on social media. So getting back to this guy, Wesley, he impresses me slightly, but more impresses me in an unnerving kind of way, of that I'm starting to, how do they use that word today? Look at him as being sus. I guess that's suspect or suspicious, because his agenda here has been only the ideology and the propaganda of pushing the Bible and talking about the Bible constantly, and try to corroborate it by invalidating every other religion and anything that goes outside of the context of the Bible, which I find, the people that thought the way that this guy thought, that this guy thinks, were the same people that in the Dark Ages were revered and talked about as being very educated, and he keeps bringing that up as well as being a linguist and a historian by his methodologies and all these things. It's kind of scary to hear this, because there are people out there now that will just be engulfed by this, the simple fact that he's a historian and a linguist. What he's saying must be true, and he's using large words and all these other things. But I told you, if you listen to my what I said earlier in the videos, now finally this guy that's sitting behind the computer, I don't know what his name is, I'll have to find out, but he's been, I think he's been pretty fair here in the fact that he's kind of using the same information or argument that Wesley's using against Wesley, or saying, Wesley, why don't you use that same thing of methodologies as some of the things you say? How do you know what you're saying is accurate? And so far Wesley has not really stated why he made some of the remarks that he did, and he didn't really show any methodologies or talk about them either. So that's what I was saying the whole time earlier in this video as well. But I don't know how long I'll be able to stay up, but hopefully it's another half hour. Let's see if I can last it. I'll try to last it, guys. Okay, I'll force myself to stay up. But I love listening to this and also being able to make some commentary on it. I may do a part 3 to this if I can't stay up now, and finish it off tomorrow. And guys, if you want to see what I'm doing, hit that subscribe button. If you like it, definitely hit that like button, hit the notification so you can know when I'm going to actually post the video. The reason I say that is because I don't post in any set schedule. I just post whenever I feel. It goes according to how I feel, okay, guys? So hopefully you're enjoying this, because I am.
Stories, how it correlated with kill your first son, related to then what happened with Jesus. But I'm still like, in my head, they're like, that's so beautiful. He was willing to sacrifice his son as God would. And I'm like,
I don't believe
that's
beautiful.
so mean that God,
I don't believe it's beautiful.
Jesus changed my whole story. No, when I'm in heaven, and I don't believe God is irrational, because he would be smarter than every one of us to be able to literally create everything. I would be like, God, I don't like, why would you tell that dude to kill his son?
I don't see any benefit in killing your own kid.
And then right at the last second, he's like, no, it's cool. I was just testing your faith in me. It's like, that seems psychologically, to me, when God's like, kill your own son, but then at the last minute,
it's sadistic.
Don't do it. Oh man, Abraham. You proved your faith to me. I would be like, Abraham. God, isn't there like I don't feel like you need to do that to a person. I don't think that's such a beautiful story. And I'm talking as a Christian. There's a lot of things with the Old Testament I struggle with, but
Okay, guys, I'm going to call this quits. I'm really falling asleep here, guys. But this is it should be out there if you want to rewatch it. Or like I said, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like the video, hit the notification bell. I have no set schedule, but I will be posting more videos now that I see this debate's kind of sparked some stuff inside me. But I'm also going to be talking about the other things that I normally talk about as well. If you look at my channel, see I talk about each and anything that's on my mind. I don't really subscribe to one genre or anything like that, or one idea. I like to talk about everything. That's what life's about, It's comprised of all these different elements. I like to get into all of them. But yeah, like I said, I don't mean any disrespect towards anyone. I'm just speculating. I also feel that it was a bit unfair the way they had Wesley come out with the accolades of his academia and then his status and all those things, and consistently bringing up the idea of methodologies to a person that is probably not qualified to it, but then also using these extremely complex jargon. Jargon's another word for language, but language used within like a profession or something. So he's bringing up all this jargon from his occupation that most people would not understand these words that he's saying, to make himself look a lot more authoritative in what he has to say. And when people do that, it always tells me that they're lacking in certain areas when they have to substantiate themselves with these claims. But guys, who am I? I'm just a spiritual philanthropist, right? And I am Rav Shiva, and this is Conduition, guys. If you haven't seen my videos on my channel, I urge you to take a look at it. Guys, I'm really falling asleep, and I'll see you tomorrow picking up where we left off right here. I don't know how much better this video is going to get, but I like it so far, and stay tuned, guys. Have a great night, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.